Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. A third virus wave hits Michigan. The state's weekly case average is the second highest in the country. Arkansas is the first state to ban children from having gender reassignment surgery, but rights groups say they will fight the law in court. A familiar face might be returning to New York. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani's son is considering running for office. The Voting Rights Reform Bill is awaiting action in the Senate. Republican Senator Ted Cruz attacks the bill and vows to stop it. And authorities reveal the cause of Tiger Woods' rollover crash. They say there will be no charges against Woods, and LA Sheriff's Department closes the case. President Biden says he and Vice President Harris will meet with both Republicans and Democrats to negotiate on the infrastructure package. But at the same time, he criticized Republicans for only wanting to stick to traditional infrastructure projects. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more from D.C.
Now, Biden's really trying to push the need to fund things that wouldn't be deemed as traditional infrastructure. Things like expanding access to high-speed internet and replacing lead pipes in schools. But some other things that he'd be funding through this bill would be billions of dollars towards building affordable housing and increasing childcare. And some Republicans do take issue with this because they say this would fund more of social welfare programs rather than infrastructure. Biden seemingly addressed the criticism that the plan goes beyond infrastructure.
But to automatically say that the only thing that's infrastructure is a highway, a bridge, or whatever, that's just not rational. 200 years ago, trains weren't traditional infrastructure either.
According to him, it also includes everything from sewer facilities to water pipes. As for bipartisanship, he says a group of Republicans came to him with a $600 billion proposal to fund more targeted infrastructure projects, but that they didn't move an inch to negotiate with him. Biden claims that his plan is a look-ahead approach, and it's what's needed to make America a world leader again.
How China and the rest of the world is racing ahead of us in the investments they have in the future.
He emphasized that he'd try to work with Republicans on the topic, but the Senate does have the green light to go ahead even without Republican votes, using a process called budget reconciliation. But it's not just Republicans who have oppositions to the bill. Some moderate Democrats are raising issues with the 28% corporate tax rate. Now, the Biden administration signaling some room for negotiation on this matter.
Should we pay it back over 20 instead of 15? Is the rate not quite 28? Is it something, lower?
And the Biden administration softening up on this 28% corporate tax hike comes at a time when there are some moderate Democrats like Senator Manchin who say they won't vote for it unless that tax hike is lowered. And we know that even with this flexibility to use the reconciliation process, this infrastructure bill still will not make it to Biden's desk without every single Democrat on board. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And in other news from the White House, Biden is expected to unveil a list of executive orders on gun control tomorrow. The orders could require background checks on ghost guns, which refer to homemade guns. Michigan's virus cases are getting worse. Almost every day for over 2 weeks, they've reported over 5,000 cases. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on Michigan's third wave.
Michigan's 7-day case average is about 6,700, the second highest in the country. That's nearly 3 times higher than that of Texas, a state with fewer pandemic restrictions, a bigger population, and no statewide mask mandate. But despite this fact, the CDC director says she recommends that Michigan tighten up their restrictions some more.
I would advocate for sort of stronger mitigation strategies, as you note, to sort of decrease the community activity, ensure mask wearing, and we're working closely with the state to try and work towards that.
We've reached out to the CDC twice about the Texas-Michigan phenomenon, but we haven't heard back. Michigan's officials say the surge is related to several factors, like spring breakers, school outbreaks, and variants. But CDC data says Michigan's only reported a total of some 1,600 cases of the B.1.1.7 variant, first detected in Britain. a small number compared to the daily cases they've reported for almost a month now.
So right now, there are over 5,000 new cases of COVID-19 in the state every day.
The trends in Michigan are looking almost as bad as they were in December during that winter peak. Basically, they're going through a third big wave. For the most part, states with tighter pandemic restrictions made up close to 50% of new cases in a week as of Tuesday. That's according to national U.S. data compiled by Johns Hopkins University. Florida's the exception, which still has fewer pandemic restrictions and smaller 7-day case averages than Michigan. Now, this really begs the question, are tighter restrictions the answer to the surges we're seeing in these states? Because the data looks like it's at odds with the science. Steph, I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks, Miguel. And 2 more states are lifting their mask mandates. First up, Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey says she's going to let the mask mandate expire on Friday. And Utah issued a new law that ends their statewide mask mandates starting this Saturday. But counties can continue mask mandates if they want to. Salt Lake County said it wouldn't extend mask mandates, but the mayor of Salt Lake City says the capital will still enforce masks. Utah State Representative Paul Ray, who supported the law, says the mayor has no authority to impose her own mask mandate. And the House passed the Voting Rights Reform Bill, the For the People Act. It now awaits action in the Senate. Republican Senator Ted Cruz calls the bill a corrupt politician act and vows to stop it.
H.R. 1 or S1, which, as Morton noted, many of us are calling the Corrupt Politicians Act.
Speaking at an online event, Senator Ted Cruz attacked the Democratic-backed voting reform bill, the For the People Act. While Democrats say this bill seeks to abolish hurdles to voting, reform the role of money in politics, and tighten federal ethics rules, Republicans see the bill as designed to take away people's right to vote and seize power.
This bill is not designed in any way, shape, or form to reduce voter fraud. In fact, it is designed explicitly to increase voter fraud.
He said the bill puts federal government in charge of elections and repeals most state integrity laws. He says it mandates ballot harvesting, which allows millions of illegal aliens to vote.
I believe stopping it is an absolutely existential goal if we are going to maintain free and democratic elections in our country.
The bill H.R. 1 has passed the House of Representatives and now waits for the action of the Senate. It faces a difficult path forward to overcome the 60-vote threshold in the evenly divided Senate, unless Democrats can reform the filibuster.
New York may be getting another Giuliani in charge. Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani's son, Andrew, is strongly considering running for New York's governor in 2022. He'll be going up to Albany on April 19th with other potential candidates to give their pitches. County chairs were reportedly invited by Chairman Nick Langworthy. The 35-year-old says he'll make a decision by that point. The younger Giuliani served in the Trump administration as a special assistant to former President Trump and as associate director in the Office of Public Liaison at the White House. Governor Cuomo, who's been leading the state since 2011, hasn't said if he will seek re-election. He's currently facing allegations of sexual abuse and of covering up data surrounding nursing home deaths during the pandemic. Arkansas is now the first state to ban healthcare workers from performing transgender surgery on children. State lawmakers overrode the governor's veto and passed the law Tuesday. And now the American Civil Liberties Union promises to fight it out in court.
Arkansas's House and Senate voted overwhelmingly to pass the Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act. It bans healthcare workers from performing gender reassignment surgery on children or giving them transgender hormone treatments. Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson had vetoed the bill. He says it opens the door for the government to interfere in healthcare. He says that is not the role of government. Hutchinson says he would support the bill if it only banned surgery. He says children already getting treatment should be able to continue. The legislature overrode the governor's veto. They got a 2/3 majority in both chambers to pass the law. Critics of early gender-changing interventions say the procedures are irreversible and that most transgender children change their mind. New York Magazine says studies show about 80% of transgender children identify with their original gender again before adulthood. The Family Council released a statement supporting Arkansas's law. It says gender reassignment surgeries can leave children sterilized and scarred for life. The organization says no one knows the long-term effects of the procedures. Holly Dixon is the executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Arkansas. She calls the law a discriminatory crusade. She says it's illegal to deny medical treatment to someone because they're transgender. The union says it will fight the law in court. The law is set to take effect later this summer.
Another California convention center will turn into a shelter to house migrant children. NTD's Jamie Joseph has more from Long Beach, California.
The Long Beach Convention Center has been empty since the pandemic began, but as early as next week, it will be transformed into an emergency shelter for up to 1,000 migrant children arriving from the southern border. The City Council approved the proposal during a special meeting Tuesday afternoon at the request of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The Biden administration is calling on local governments to provide temporary facilities to accommodate for the surge of unaccompanied minors entering the U.S. The proposal allows the city manager to work directly with federal authorities to establish the shelter and get children connected with family members or sponsors. The city's role will be connecting with local nonprofits and other government services to provide health evaluations and educational programs. The convention will be used for a period of 3 to 4 months until August 2nd at the latest, according to Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia. Federal agents say border facilities are currently overcrowded. Late last month, the San Diego City Council approved the federal government's request to transform the San Diego Convention Center also into a shelter for migrant children. I applaud the leadership of Mayor Robert Garcia and the City of Long Beach for participating in this humanitarian relief effort. These children need help, and this is the right thing to do. The 400,000 square foot convention center is currently being used as a vaccination site in the parking lot, but inside will soon become a hub for housing, food, and recreational services for the migrant children, with funding from the federal government. Jamie Joseph, NTD News, Los Angeles.
Vice President Kamala Harris thanked the President of Mexico for his cooperation on migration issues. They agreed in a phone call to work together to address the root cause of migration from the Northern Triangle. The White House says it's not aware of any trips that Harris will make to the border. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the details.
On Wednesday, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke with Mexican President Obrador on the phone. The two leaders agreed to address root causes of migration to the U.S. from the Northern Triangle countries, which are El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. They say those causes of migration include poverty, violence, and lack of economic opportunity. They also discussed how the U.S. and Mexico can deepen their relationship to target human smuggling and human trafficking. A reporter asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki if Harris plans to make a trip to the border.
Visited the border. I don't have any trips to outline or preview. What our focus is on is solutions and ensuring we have more beds, we're making the processing more efficient and effective, and that we are addressing this in a humane way that keeps these kids as safe as we possibly can.
This comes 2 weeks after Biden tasked Harris with stemming the migration at the southern border. Senator Lindsey Graham said Harris cannot possibly understand her job if she doesn't physically come to the border. The White House said the construction of the border wall remains paused. But according to the Washington Times, DHS Secretary Mayorkas said he may restart construction to plug what he calls gaps. Right now, they're still reviewing how funds are allocated.
There are some components of the wall that had already been allocated, the funding to continue building by Congress. So we're working within what is allowable. But our focus is not, we don't believe the wall is an answer.
The Biden administration is proposing to invest in smart security at the border. They say they are trying to establish 21st century solutions for border management. And that's why they want to build what they call a functioning immigration system. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Forbes' annual billionaire list is out, and it says former President Trump's net worth fell by over $1 billion during his presidency. NTD's Colin Frederickson reports.
Former President Donald Trump's net worth shrank by nearly 1/3 over his 4 years in the White House. That's according to the Forbes annual billionaire list. The Forbes roundup of the world's richest individuals shows Trump with an estimated net worth of $2.4 billion in 2021. That's compared to about $3.5 billion in 2017, Trump's first year in office, or nearly 32% more than now. The data affirms Trump's numerous statements that his presidency wasn't making him richer. Trump is the only billionaire to have served as president of the United States. Over the past year, billionaires have multiplied at a striking rate, with a record 493 people joining the Forbes billionaires list since March of last year. That's a pace of around one new billionaire every 17 hours. Some famous faces that are newcomers to the billionaire list include celebrity Kim Kardashian and Apple CEO Tim Cook. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos tops the list with an estimated net worth of $177 billion, followed by Tesla CEO Elon Musk with $151 billion. Colin Frederickson, NTD News.
Professors at Cornell University rejected the school's proposal of a Beijing-funded program. We look at some of their reasons behind it.
The Cornell Faculty Senate last Wednesday rejected a resolution endorsing a partnership proposal with Peking University. Student leaders at Cornell also unanimously voted to demand that the partnership stop. Both groups voiced concern for human rights abuses in China, especially genocide in Xinjiang, as well as the risks to academic freedom.
Could you imagine such a regime in which academic freedom also existed? And that problem is so serious that we tend to combine the two.
The partnership proposed involved a joint degree program paid for by the Chinese Ministry of Education. The Washington Free Beacon reports that in the 5 years to 2019, Cornell raised at least $27 million from China. According to the outlet, the new partnership with Peking University could bring in up to an additional $1 million annually. However, some professors worry that their institution values lucrative relationships more than their moral principles.
In effect, many faculty felt that the Chinese government was purchasing the legitimacy that a connection to Cornell would offer.
In recent years, the U.S. has become increasingly concerned about influences from the Chinese regime coming into American campuses, with the government and other institutions considering especially how to maintain academic freedom.
We just have to cut ties with China. That means, for instance, no Confucius Institutes. That means no joint programs with China. And that means no Chinese campuses of American universities in China.
Bensel and another faculty member introduced new resolutions that will strengthen the role of the Faculty Senate in deciding future partnerships with all authoritarian countries. The voting for those resolutions is set to conclude Wednesday. They say they are optimistic.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hosted a discussion with Silicon Valley businessman Peter Thiel. The discussion centered around China, big tech, and the threats posed by the Communist Party. NTD's Steve Lance has the details.
Last night, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo sat down at the Nixon seminar with PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel. The two discussed important issues impacting high-tech America and national security. They focused on the threats the Chinese Communist Party poses to the U.S. and how the communist regime uses big tech to undermine America. Thiel, who also sits on the board at Facebook, suggested that many U.S.-based tech companies and universities have played a role in China's military rise. A specific case he mentioned was when Google refused to work with the U.S. military on artificial intelligence, yet they were willing to work with a Chinese civilian company. Understanding the dynamics of how a communist regime operates can be both complex and nuanced. Thiel said that in a communist country, civilian and military are often fused together. He also highlighted the disproportionate ratio of Chinese students studying in the U.S. compared to Americans studying in China, as well as how many American universities have turned a blind eye to Chinese espionage. He suggested that the flow of Chinese money coming into these universities should be investigated. Thiel asked Pompeo if he thinks the U.S. has a good understanding of the power struggle in China. China experts say the Chinese dictator Xi Jinping's political hold on the country is more fragile than what the regime projects. Pompeo, who was former head of the CIA and Secretary of State in the Trump administration, was cautious to jump to conclusions. He cited the fall of the Berlin Wall and how no one saw the collapse of the Soviet Union coming until the moment it happened. Pompeo was unapologetic in stressing the threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party. He emphasized that this is not a country threatening us. He said it is the Communist Party, and that we should be unashamed to talk about this fact.
Up next, a huge apartment fire in New York City forced over 200 people to leave their homes with no more than suitcases. Luckily, the neighborhood is helping out. And authorities are revealing what caused Tiger Woods' car crash. They said there would be no charge against Woods, and LA Sheriff's Department is closing the case. Firefighters in New York City managed to contain an 8-alarm apartment fire, but they're still on the scene dealing with the aftermath. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
We are here in Queens, New York City, where a huge apartment fire broke out almost 30 hours ago. And as you can see, there's still a lot of fire trucks and policemen around and a lot of people on the streets because almost 90 families lost their homes. So they're gonna have to stay in hotels at least for tonight. It's exactly the building you see right behind me, and the fire broke out in the top floor and completely destroyed the entire top floor. Now, what's nice though is the people are really helping each other. So I'm gonna show you in a bit that the people here, they're just giving out free food, they're giving out water, other necessities, and that's actually really nice to see that the people are supporting each other in what's a really hard day for them. Around 400 firefighters from various New York City fire departments were at the scene. It took them 12 hours to contain the fire. The smoke engulfed multiple blocks in the neighborhood.
Apocalyptic, if that makes sense, because it's like you couldn't walk. It was scary. I could see it was coming fast. It's like whatever they did to put it out didn't even work until a lot later in the night.
The owner of a hot dog stand lives right across the street from the burned building. He started giving out free food because he knows their situation all too well.
Giving back, because I remember one time my house was in a fire and I remember losing everything. So it's like a near and dear thing to the heart, you know what I mean? So we want to give back to the people.
But he wasn't the only resident helping out. A lot of people were handing out food packages, snacks, drinks and more. The firefighters are expected to stay in the area to secure the building for the next few days. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department gave an update on Tiger Woods' car accident. Authorities determined human error caused the crash that seriously injured Woods in February. NTD's Jamie Joseph gives us the details.
Famous golfer Tiger Woods crashed not too far from this spot in Rolling Hills, just 20 miles outside of Los Angeles. The speed limit here is 45 miles per hour, but reports show that when he crashed, he was traveling nearly double the speed limit. Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva on Wednesday confirmed that speed was the primary cause of the crash that injured Woods.
Estimated speeds at the first area of impact were 84 to 87 miles per hour, and the final estimated speed when the vehicle struck the tree was 75 miles per hour. There were no citations issued and there are no signs of impairment.
Woods suffered serious injuries in the February 23rd crash when he struck a raised median around 7 a.m. The Genesis SUV he was driving crossed through two oncoming lanes and uprooted a tree on a downhill stretch that police said is known for wrecks. Sheriff officials say they believe Woods inadvertently pressed the accelerator instead of the brakes when he crashed. Woods released a statement saying, "I'm so grateful to both of the Good Samaritans who came to assist me and called 911. I am also thankful to the LASD deputies, firefighters, and paramedics for helping me so expertly at the scene and getting me safely to the hospital." Investigators say there was no indication Woods was under the influence or on his phone when he crashed, so he will not be charged for any wrongdoing. Woods is currently in one of his properties in Florida recovering from multiple surgeries and said he is thankful for all of the overwhelming support. Jamie Joseph, NTD News, Los Angeles.
As more Californians hit the surf, strong ocean currents can pose a threat to the unaware. But it's not just the water where unknowns lurk. San Francisco's fire department says it performed more than 70 ocean and cliff rescues already this year. NTD's Jason Blair brings us the story.
Y'all ready? Ready? Okay, pressure's going over. The San Francisco Fire Department performed a full-scale surf and rescue demonstration Tuesday at Ocean Beach. The department says lately they're taking more rescue calls around the city. As lockdown restrictions ease up in San Francisco, more people are wanting to get outside and enjoy the parks and beaches. However, San Francisco Fire Department wants to make sure people are aware of the possible dangers.
We want the public to know that we encourage them to come to our coastline, as it is beautiful and has so many awesome features, but it also has hazards and dangers. But if you're educated and prepared, you can minimize those.
Baxter says the department wants to help stop injuries and accidents, such as a recent rescue involving an adult and their dog who fell down a cliff.
Don't be ashamed. Call 911. Don't try to get out of it on your own. If it's too dangerous, above your expectations or your limits, let us come and respond.
If you want to take a selfie, Baxter says find a safe spot.
It's great views. Today's a little foggy, but other days this is just amazing out here. It's like, I want to take that picture. And then they fall down the cliff.
And he says you should try to avoid the ocean in extreme conditions such as 50-degree weather and strong currents.
But we also have to be realistic, and we let them know if you are going to go in the water, go in pairs, go in buddies. If you're bringing your children, hold on to your children.
He says the recreational areas like parks and beaches have been getting more crowded, but so far the current rescue numbers are still close to normal. They hope their safety awareness efforts help keep those numbers on the low side. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
The Navy corpsman who shot 2 sailors Tuesday is now identified. Fantahun Gurma Waldesenbet was a 38-year-old laboratory technician posted at Fort Detrick in Maryland. Police killed him on the base after he shot 2 sailors with a rifle at a nearby business park and sped away. One of the wounded sailors was released from the hospital on Tuesday afternoon. The other was in critical condition. Police cordoned off Waldesenbet's apartment where he lived with his wife and children. Authorities haven't disclosed a motive yet. And after months of closures, the Kennedy Center is planning to reopen in September and celebrate its 50th anniversary season. The Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. announced Tuesday that it will reopen in full this fall to celebrate its golden anniversary. The center canceled or postponed most performances after the CCP virus outbreak. The center released its lineup of events. It'll kick off on September 10th with the National Symphony Concert. It'll mark the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and honor frontline healthcare workers throughout the pandemic. They're expected to release more seasons of theater, dance, ballet, and music soon. A growing number of states are bringing back a work requirement to keep unemployment benefits. According to unemploymentpua.com, North Carolina, South Carolina, Nevada, and Idaho recently added a work mandate to its jobless benefits. The states say some or all recipients will now have to search for work or grow their skills. 19 other states have also brought back this requirement. States suspended the mandate after the pandemic forced states to lock down last year. And coming up, Taiwan conducts military exercises. This time, they're more wary Beijing could attack the island this year. And the CCP virus death toll in Wuhan remains concealed, but mourning relatives are crowding in cemeteries. That and more on NTD News.
If you're like me, and I think it's actually most of us, then you're getting really fed up with the nonsense going on inside the banking system. I mean, we've worked hard our entire lives to retire comfortably. We just recovered from the crash of 2008, and it seems like it's about to happen all over again. Look at the too-big-to-fail banks. They're only getting bigger as the Fed hands them trillions of dollars daily, while simple folks like you and me, we're only getting the short end of the stick. That's why I'm glad I found this book called The Bank Failure Survival Guide. Give us a call, and we'll send you a free copy with no obligations whatsoever, just one American to another, telling you about some options that you might not have considered. Call 866-239-2619 today for your free copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide. That's 866-239-2619.
When you look at TV networks in America,
A soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Taiwan is set to conduct new military exercises in light of Beijing's aggression. They're anticipating China might try to invade. NTD's Don Ma has more.
Taiwan's defense ministry is releasing the details of this year's annual military exercises. It will be slightly different this time around. The military exercises will be conducted with the presumption that Beijing will invade Taiwan this year. The concern stems from an escalation in Chinese military aggression. This year, the Chinese regime made its largest military incursion into Taiwan's air zone. Taiwan is also concerned about Beijing's rapid military development. Last month, a U.S. Pentagon war simulation predicted that the U.S. will lose fast in a war against China. That is, if the U.S. intervened in a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The U.S. doesn't have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan, but U.S. law requires that Washington supplies the island with means of self-defense. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, claims Taiwan as part of its own territory and has vowed to annex it by force. While Taiwan has never formally declared independence, it does have its own democratically elected government, military, and constitution. On Wednesday, Taiwan's defense ministry announced that the military exercises will be conducted in April and in July. The exercises will compose of beachfront combat and cityfront combat. Some 8,000 soldiers will participate. That's an 8-fold increase from last year. Other exercises will likely involve operating fighter jets and firing missiles. The Taiwanese side is not releasing the precise location of the exercises. Also on Wednesday, Taiwan's foreign minister told reporters that we will fight the war if we need to fight the war. We will defend ourselves to the very last day. Don Ma, NTD News.
In light of China's increased aggression in the Indo-Pacific, South Korea is seeking alliances to counter it. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
The South Korean Foreign Ministry says the country is willing to cooperate with the Quad alliance. The collaboration is believed to be a counterbalance to the Chinese regime's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. South Korea says the cooperation will be on an issue-by-issue basis. They want to tackle issues including transnational crimes and cyber and maritime security. The Quad alliance consists of the U.S., Australia, Japan, and India. It first formed back in 2007. It re-entered the spotlight during the Trump administration. Then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo bolstered the alliance. Its purpose is to counter an increasingly assertive Chinese regime in the Indo-Pacific. The Biden administration also vowed to work closer with allies and preserve the Quad alliance. Although South Korea hasn't received a formal invitation into the Quad, it shows determination to cooperate. South Korean officials said even if it might not be the Quad, we can seek cooperation issue by issue with the Quad member countries in areas where we can contribute. Because the Chinese regime is largely believed to have underreported virus deaths, the real death toll of the CCP virus in Wuhan remains a mystery. Official data from the regime says nearly 3,900 people died of the virus in China as of last April. But recent events in Wuhan suggest the real number might be far more than that. Last Sunday was a traditional Chinese holiday commemorating the dead. Online videos and pictures show that cemeteries in Wuhan are packed with people. Locals say this is very unusual. Along with the pictures, a tweet says, "Today, Wuhan people began to sweep the tombs. One of the cemeteries is densely packed with new graves, and people in mourning are everywhere." Wuhan resident Mr. Chi told the Chinese language edition of the Epoch Times Wuhan cemeteries opened 10 days earlier for tomb sweeping this year, but there were still traffic jams all the time. He had never seen such a thing before. Chinese media says there are 320,000 people visiting cemeteries in Wuhan this year, around Memorial Day. Data from the regime's Department of Civil Affairs may also shed some light on the issue. Official data shows during the first quarter of 2020, over 150,000 people disappeared from the province's pension benefits list. But before that, the number had been growing for over 20 years in a row. Officials refused to explain the decline. At the same time, they reportedly prohibit both media and citizen journalists to collect data on funerals.
Coming up, pornography could be contributing to sexual abuse in schools. That's according to new research in the UK. And a big win for cheesemakers on the island of Cyprus. The European Union is giving protected status to one kind of cheese that's said to have started there as early as 1500 AD. Find out more on NTD News. With teens alleging abuse in UK schools, some are raising concerns that easy access to pornographic material could be a driving factor. NTD's Jane Werrell has the story.
Schools have recently been caught up in allegations of abuse, branded a Me Too moment in education. It's fueled concerns that easy access to pornography could be contributing to the problem.
If young people are exposed to pornography at a very young age and they believe, as my research has supported, that it's realistic, then it has an influence in the way that young people perceive sexual relationships, perceive women. And let's be honest, women in pornography are often objectified, mistreated, and the element of consent is somewhat blurred within pornography itself.
Marta Lozzo co-led research several years ago that involved speaking to 1,100 boys and girls aged 11 to 16 about pornography. It found around half of them said they had already seen online pornographic material at least once, with some younger people coming across it accidentally.
Just to give you a number, just half of the boys, which is just over 53%, who had seen pornography thought that it was realistic, compared to 39% of the girls.
The British Journal of Criminology this week published analysis of over 130,000 video titles on adult websites in the UK. It found that around 1 in 8 video titles shown on the homepage described activities considered sexually violent. Researchers found the material was available with little or no age verification. It's known that this isn't a new problem, but pornographic material has become more accessible in recent years. There are continued calls to add age verification on such websites. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Small business owners in Italy want the government to let them reopen after a year of being forced to close. Hundreds of people gathered in front of the Italian parliament yesterday protesting the restrictions. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
Tensions were high in Rome on Tuesday. Hundreds of restaurant and small business owners protested outside the parliament. They want lawmakers to lift restrictions and let them reopen.
They have taken the right to work away. They have taken away our dignity.
Last week, the cabinet ruled that bars and restaurants could only offer a takeout service in April. It angered many businesses that hope to reopen fully as the vaccination campaign picks up speed. One man says he'll keep his restaurant open despite receiving multiple fines.
They told me to close, but I continued to stay open regardless. So from tomorrow, you have to follow my example. You have to open because nobody can tell you to close.
Another restaurant owner in Rome tried to defy rules Wednesday by opening his doors to the public.
After 13 months, we have kept up payment for expenses and the rent. But we are now at the point where either we open or we die. So we cannot wait for the government.
The police showed up before anyone could take a seat. The president of the Hospitality Association came to show his support for the restaurant owner.
You understand that now we have been closed for months. We are receiving emails about eviction orders. We no longer have money to pay the electricity bills and therefore risk power disconnection.
Business owners who lost part of their earnings as a result of the closures are receiving some compensation from the government, though many say it is not enough.
Cyprus is getting protected status for its prized halloumi. This gives the producers the sole right to sell the rubbery cheese in the European Union.
Makers of Cyprus's hallowed halloumi cheese can breathe a sigh of relief. No one but them will be allowed to sell the rubbery, salty and much-loved dairy product within the EU after it receives protected status later this month. Cheesemaker George Petrou said this reaffirms what the industry has been saying for years, that halloumi is Cypriot, potentially dating back as far as 1500.
Unfortunately, in recent years, many countries try to copy us. So the registration for this status, this result that we have today, will help very much, in that other countries will not produce halloumi or something similar, which misleads customers.
Petrou first started selling halloumi in 1982, using 250 litres of milk a day. Now his company processes 250 tonnes of milk per day, employs 220 people and exports to 40 countries. His expansion mirrors that of Cyprus halloumi production itself. The rubbery cheese is now the country's second most valuable export after pharmaceuticals. The industry has grown between 20 to 22% annually for the past 5 years, according to official data. Disagreement on the recipe was a hurdle in securing the protected status. The ratios of different milks has been the center of debate. It will be set by decree until 2024. After that, at least 50% will be made up of sheep and goat's milk, with the rest supplemented by cow's milk.
Coming up, NASA prepares to test a helicopter on Mars. It could be another Wright brothers moment on a new planet. That and more on NTD News.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our income.
Our friends sold their policy to help pay their medical bills. And that got me thinking. Maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I was skeptical. So I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Don't cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies, or call 1-800-509-8500. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
Most people are right-handed, and now a recent study suggests that dogs, or man's best friend, are more likely to be right-pawed too.
An analysis of 18,000 dogs in Britain found nearly 75% had a preferred paw when reaching for food. Of these, researchers found that, like humans, right-handedness or right-pawedness took preference. Around 60% of dogs with a preferred paw favoured their right side. That's compared to around 90% of the human population who are right-handed. The data comes from the BBC's Test Your Pet survey, in which dog owners were asked to place a treat inside a tube and observe how their pet tried to get it. The trial was repeated 3 times. Researchers from the University of Lincoln say having a preferred side, known as lateralization, is beneficial as it makes animals more efficient at tasks. They also noted that female dogs are more likely to be right-pawed than male dogs, and elderly dogs tend to prefer the right paw more than younger dogs. But left-handedness remains in the minority. Studies show only 10% of humans are left-handed, but here about 40% of dogs were left-pawed.
NASA is planning the first flight of its experimental Martian helicopter as soon as this weekend. The mission could mark the first powered, controlled flight on another planet. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
NASA's newest Mars rover, Perseverance, has been the star of the Red Planet recently. But before the car-sized vehicle can head for an ancient river delta to collect rocks for eventual return to Earth, it must release an experimental helicopter named Ingenuity. NASA said it's targeting a first flight as soon as April 11th.
From day one, this was the unwavering dream of our team, to get our helicopter launched to Mars so that we can get that opportunity to do the very first rotorcraft flight test in the actual environment of Mars.
One of the biggest challenges scientists and engineers face is how to get the helicopter off the ground in the Martian environment. Atmospheric pressure on the Red Planet is very low, about 1% of that on Earth. The attempt could mark the first powered, controlled flight on another planet. In fact, the Mars helicopter holds a piece of the Wright brothers' first airplane, a small piece of fabric from the 1903 Wright Flyer.
Sometimes, you have to do something just to show that you can do it, in order to show that it's possible. And so when the Wright brothers, flew for the first time, they didn't fly a fully equipped passenger airplane. They flew an experimental aircraft.
NASA's 4-pound helicopter will attempt to rise 10 feet into the extremely thin Martian air on its first hop. If Ingenuity is successful during its 31-day experimental trip, the small helicopter will prove that powered flights can be accomplished on Mars. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Spring is in the air, and for many animals, that signals the arrival of adorable young ones. 2 baby giraffes, 1 male and 1 female, were born nearly back-to-back at a Miami zoo. They're the 54th and 55th giraffes born in the zoo's history. The male was born on April 2nd. He doesn't have a name just yet. He weighed 181 pounds and is the 7th baby born to 14-year-old mother Mia. While he was making his exhibit debut, another giraffe was born at the zoo, a female, weighing in at 119 pounds. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.